Warzone is full of movement kings. And today we're taking down 5 of the most notorious offenders. The movement has consumed the Call of Duty ecosystem, and for a lot of us has made the games more frustrating than fun. But I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that way. We're going to cover some simple ways to improve your gameplay that takes the focus away from matching movement with mindless movement to understanding what your in-game strengths are and how to use them to your advantage. It doesn't take much time or practice, which is great for 9-to-5ers, and allows you to put up new PRs all while fly swatting up-and-coming movement royalty. And we have to start with understanding something quintessential to really any first-person shooter, the Rechallenge. We've all been there. You crack an enemy player's plates, they turn the corner, and 2 seconds later jump out and absolutely destroy you. Now you're dead and wondering what the hell just happened to me. You had the health advantage, the first shots, so how in the world are you now the one on a respawn timer? And why does it feel so damn hard to stop? Well, there's a simple way to counter the Rechallenge that I swear everyone can do, but in order to get there, I need you to understand what's going through a sweaty player's mind when they decide to Rechallenge so aggressively. When a good player loses health, their instincts, and probably yours as well, is to move and reposition. They're scrambling to get out of the position they're in, and they're looking for a window or anything to jump out of to put armor back on and reset the gunfight. However, if the timing is tight and they can't find an escape, this is when they'll Rechallenge. They know it's likely you're pushing and their window is closing fast. It's an act of desperation. Their only hope is to catch you off guard, and if you're not ready for it, it works. So again, how do we stop it? And more importantly, how can we stop it consistently? It's important to understand 2 things. 1, you have the advantage. The fact that they are jumping at you like a meathead is because they don't have any other choice. You do. However, the second thing is, unfortunately, you've already made the mistake. You see, the time to kill in Call of Duty is so fast that by not getting the full kill immediately, you've already given up a bit of control of the situation. It doesn't mean you've lost and should run away, but you've given the other player a chance to save themselves. What they're really trying to do is catch you here. We can call it no man's land or dead zone or whatever you'd like, but this area where you're transitioning from ADSing to sprinting is what they're banking on and catching you in. It's a timing issue, and if they do, they win. Quick side note, you might hear people talk about breaking cameras, and they're not talking about smashing a Sony A700. In first-person shooters, there's something called peeker's advantage, and in essence, all that means is that the players moving into a gunfight will typically have a frame advantage to somebody who is stationary. It takes time for the game to communicate information from player A to the server and then relay that to player B. So as player A begins to peek or challenge a gunfight, player B will always see player A's movement slightly behind when they are actually happening. It is not a massive desync, something in the range of milliseconds, but it's why all competitive gaming events take place in person on a local network. So when an enemy player decides to Rechallenge, what they're doing is regaining the frame advantage, and by swinging out wide, they're also forcing you to reposition your aim. So if we understand this and learn to expect it, this is how we can shut it down every time. I call it reposition and hold. Let's say you get first shots on and force them to take cover. We want to maintain pressure and secure the elimination, but again, if you sprint into the open and chase after them without having any idea if they're plating, ADSing, or running away, you're probably already piecing together that this is not a great idea. So what I want you to practice is repo and hold, or reposition and hold. The timing to this will feel more natural the more you practice, but after you do damage, move forward to your next piece of cover and hold for a beat. Reposition and hold. Now what's going to happen is if the sweaty player decides to jump out at you, not only have you changed your position, forcing the other player to move their aim as well, but you will also either already be in your ADS animation or re-entering it, closing or completely removing your vulnerability window. And if they don't jump out, the worst case scenario is now that they have full health and you're in a different location, trained on their location, continuing to apply pressure. You're essentially just resetting the fight in this situation. You can obviously combine combine this with a slide to get into position or whatever you're comfortable with, but the takeaway here is to let them make the mistake, not you. You won't win every single gunfight this way, but I guarantee you'll fly swat way more movement kings than you'll lose to.
And that takes us into countering the meathead.
This is Tim Duncan. Everybody say hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Now, what in the world does Tim Duncan have to do with Warzone? If you never heard of Tim Duncan, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, for anybody that knows the game of basketball, you would know that Mr. Duncan is often regarded as one of, if not the greatest players of all time at his position. And he had a nickname to go along with his style of play. They called him the Big Fundamental because Timmy D executed the fundamentals of his sport at an elite level. That's going to be you. You see, while there are flashier ways to play the game, what good does slide canceling back and forth do you if you don't know why you're doing it? We don't need to worry about inside out crossovers. We can hit bank shots and score the same 2 points and be just as good as everyone else. So let's make like Timmy and go over a couple quick ways you can improve your fundamentals. And it starts with a little defense. Let's say, for instance, you're working on applying pressure with a little repo and hold, but the player catches you off guard and slides at you. Or maybe you're rotating and mid-rotation somebody jams you. There's a simple technique to counter it. If they're not in frame, reset your aim. Meaning, if somebody jams you or begins to break your camera and they are becoming difficult to track up close, release your ADS, hip fire, and then re-zoom in. It might sound a little bit more complicated than it really is because all you need to do is get in the habit of tapping your ADS button. For example, I had just respawned back in and I'm rotating through the bottom of a prison when this madman dives at me through the office window. At first, I try to ADS, but as they get closer and closer, I release my aim and begin to hip fire, which allows me to do something really important. Move. And I'm not talking about diving back at them, but as we go into our hip fire stance, I reposition my crosshair by strafing to the right. This is something you already do, regardless if you're on controller or mouse and key. We all use some combination of strafe and aim to target an enemy. So by releasing our ADS, we can let our muscle memory take over and bring the enemy back into focus. Obviously, some weapons are going to have stronger hipfire control than others, but what we're focusing on here isn't spraying and praying, we're resetting our aim. There's a lot of times I catch players getting lost in the sauce of Omni movement because they're standing still and ADSing, and by the time they realize they can't keep up, they're already looking at the respawn timer. If they're not in frame, reset your aim. So what I'd like you to start practicing is this. If somebody gets too close, release your aim and slam your left analog stick left or right. If you're on controller, this also brings aim assist into play. And if you're on keyboard, well, I wish you the best of luck. As their movement slows or you gain more distance, then re-enter your ADS. It'll take a little getting used to, but this is a really strong technique for stopping camera breaks. That's 2 down, but this next boss might be the most annoying to deal with out of the entire lineup. And they've seen a resurgence in numbers since the introduction of Omni movement. I'm talking about the YY TikTok demon. While on the surface they may seem intimidating, I can assure you they can be easily handled. They will slip and slide and jump through windows to get out of your line of sight, but it is very rare for them to stand still long enough to actually fight you. They have a quota of slide cancels and weapon swaps they need to hit before they even think about pulling the trigger, which gives you all the opportunity in the world to take them down. The problem with fighting an anime profile pick, G Fuel infused gremlin, is that they'll trap you. They'll waste your ammo, try to jam you, and as soon as you're reloading, pounce. Next thing you know, you see yourself looking like a goofball on somebody's timeline. So how do we stop them? Well, we've talked about practicing a little offense and a little defense, but what I'd like you to do now is practice patience. I've thrown a lot of information your way, and sometimes that can feel a bit overwhelming, especially if you're the person who doesn't have a lot of time to devote to Call of Duty. So I want to say, it's okay to wait. There can be a sense of urgency in gunfights when a lot of movement is being thrown your way, but if you start panicking, they start winning. Obviously, this is very situationally dependent, but let's say you get into a gunfight with one, you crack them, and they start dancing in the streets. If they start running away, you don't have to chase them, you don't have to look for them. You can move on to another fight. Getting frustrated and running after players like this will put yourself in a bad position. And if there's anything you can take away from this video, it's that you don't have to make crazy plays, but we should avoid making the bad ones. More often than not, players that move more than they should are going to be impatient and make a mistake. Let them. That doesn't mean don't move, but we should understand when and where not to. And when you see little gremlins vibrating from corner to corner, it's okay to slow down and let them come to you. Now, the last hurdle to get past before facing the final boss is a peculiar one, but one we must conquer on our journey. I'm calling them the Gopher, because no matter how much bobbing and weaving they do, they're rooted in one spot. Most of the situations we've talked about so far, you as a player have some sort of control, and we're working to maintain that control. Well, the Gopher will tend to be the one holding a power position. If you catch them bobbing up and down on a piece of cover, this is called snaking, or maybe we should call it gophering, and it's extremely difficult to combat. Remember Peeker's advantage? Well, when somebody is gophering, they are abusing the Peeker's advantage mechanic. So what do? The easiest solution is to use your tool belt. Warzone isn't great for a lot of things, but it's great at providing a plethora of things for you to pick up and use. Do you have a stun, a grenade, throwing axe? If yes, use it. They're in the game to give the user an advantage, so take use of your advantage. If not, well, you got a little work to do. But first, ask yourself again, do I have to take this gunfight? Sometimes we don't have a choice. There's one lane and the zone is breathing at your neck, but a lot of times there are options. If the situation doesn't seem good or they hit their first shots, it's okay to back out of the gunfight, reposition, and live to fight another day. You want to look for free fights. So if it's really difficult, go look for another free fight. There's a power balance in every gunfight, and if the scale tips too far in their favor, you'll lose every time. With that said, if you do run into the Gopher, you don't need any equipment. Here's what I recommend. The first step is to get to cover. If you take this fight in the open, you'll lose 95 times out of 100. Once you're in cover, you need to fight to regain some kind of power. Get shots on, move, fight again. This is an extremely important concept to understand for not only this situation, but for the grander scheme of first-person shooters. If you challenge this player from one location and then they continue to fight from that exact same location, you're putting yourself on a silver platter. Not only are you making yourself more predictable, but that enemy player no longer has to use their right analog stick or mouse. All they have to do is bob up and down, and you are staying right smack dab in the center of their crosshairs. We need to force them to think, because thinking is a movement player's biggest weakness. So if you can get shots on, great. Time to challenge either from a new location or even from a different height level. Make them move their aim. It sounds small, but it can make a massive difference in your survivability. Regardless, this is going to be a tough fight to win. Like I mentioned, it's okay not to take it. And if you do, a lot of times you might not win. But keep working towards putting yourself in a better position. The more comfortable you get in these situations, the more composure you'll have, and you might surprise yourself with taking a couple you shouldn't have. And that takes us to the antithesis of our video. The final boss, the final challenge, the true movement king. This is a tough one to tackle. They've mastered the aggro's Rechallenge, the meathead's aggressive push, the YY demon's elusiveness, and the Gopher's patience. One might even say they're a fairly good player. So how do we stop them? Well, we've talked offense, defense, patience, and perseverance, but let's work to combine them. Now, a movement king is going to be controlled chaos. They'll be bouncing around, pressing buttons, but they'll have some purpose behind those button presses. So we have to counter with equal determination. There is not a singular right answer for a movement king, because they probably won't approach you the same way every time. So let's take a look at a couple examples. This is the middle of a game on Area 99. As I'm buying a UAV, I start taking shots from a fairly sweaty team we've been fighting all game.
Buy station prices are adjusted.
My first reaction is to get behind cover. So I sprint to the sidewall here and create some distance. Right now, I'm at a disadvantage. I don't know exactly where they're at, and I'm low on health. So what we should be trying to do is reset the playing field. I rotate towards my teammate, get fully plated, and wait. It's okay for us to be patient here. There's no need for me to continue sprinting around until I know exactly where they're coming from. We spot them out front, and I think they might get aggressive. So I pause for a beat to see if they might push. When they don't, that gives us an opportunity to take back control. So I reposition and hold. Again, this seems like a half decent team. So every time I slide out wide, I pause for a beat, then push forward. This next bit happens quickly.
Back one, knock one, the other one's over here.
Check fire! Resurgence is about to win.
I know there's more than one of them, so I'd love to get a quick knock on the Gopher who's unaware. As I'm chasing the knock, his teammate pops up to cover him. This is a bad fight for me, so I decide to back down, but I notice the guy shot first start to push me like a meathead. So I strafe out wide, and as I begin to strafe out wide to meet him, I release my aim, ADS on him, and then lock in. We got a crucial knock, and that leads us to the most important part of this whole fight. Now that we have the advantage again, I try to push after their remaining player, but they've disappeared. So I let them go. I know it's not a flashy way to end the sequence, but if I start sprinting around looking for this player, they could very easily pick me off from a new position. I've got no information, and I'm not fully played myself. Now, I will say that if you're somebody looking to get more kills in a game, maybe you can give a chase and hope for the best. But I really think it's important to acknowledge smart decision making in these scenarios. If you feel yourself becoming better and better, there's nothing wrong with pushing yourself into more uncomfortable situations. But that's not the goal of this video. The goal is to make a high probability of successful choices. These decisions can compound on each other and put you in situations like we are now, later in that same game. My friend and I have to put ourselves in a great position towards the center of the final zone. I rotate up to get a knock on a team rotating in. And then because I have the advantage, I push down and challenge the remaining player. There's one left. And there the Gopher. I get a little impatient, push inside, and get knocked. But I was able to do enough damage for my teammate to come in and secure the win. And even though it's probably not TikTok worthy, I'd say a 20 kill win is halfway decent for your average player. And that takes down the final movement king.
It's not always an easy task, but if you continue to focus on making less bad decisions, I guarantee you're going to have a better time playing Call of Duty. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.